This is the video for Wanted a Just Right Government. Before beginning the video, let's take a look at the scale. The learning goal is standard SS 7C 1.5. You should be able to identify how the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation led to the writing of the Constitution. If you're able to do that by the end of this lesson, then you have met the learning goal. Alright, you should now be on the page that says Wanted a Just Right Government. You should have a pen, pencil, or highlighter ready, and be ready to mark the text as we go through the reading. Let's start at the top of the page. Wanted a Just Right Government. Independent citizens seek awesome government. When the American colonists gained their independence from the British after the Revolutionary War, the Americans were faced with a problem. What kind of government should they have? They've lived for years under British rule, and they'd had lots of complaints. Now they would create a government from scratch, and they had few requirements. Independent citizens seek weak government. Their experience under heavy-handed British rule left the newly independent Americans a little bit skittish. Basically, they wanted a government that couldn't do much. They started by drafting a document called the Articles of Confederation. A confederation is a group of individuals united together for a purpose. In this case, the 13 states that had been British colonies before the war. So underline or highlight that sentence. A confederation is a group of individuals united together for a purpose. And in this case, the 13 states that had been British colonies before the war. So basically they didn't want a government that was telling them what to do all the time, like the king. So they started by making it a confederation. So each one of the colonies that had now became a state, they kind of all joined a group like, hey, we'll be a group and we'll work together, but we're not going to have some big government telling us what to do. The Articles of Confederation explained how the 13 states would be governed as one nation. And here are the basics. So underline or highlight that sentence as well. The Articles of Confederation explained how the 13 states would be governed as one nation. Each state was an independent and had its own government. Each state would send representatives to the Congress of the Confederation, a lawmaking body. Congress was the only branch of government, so there was no president, there was no courts. And in Congress, each state got one vote. So, after we got rid of the king, the Revolutionary War, we won, the British left, the Americans had to make a government. They didn't want a government telling them what to do all the time like the king, so they made the Articles of Confederation. It was the first government we tried, and it didn't work out very well. So, as we go through this, pay attention for reasons why the Articles didn't work. A rocky start. On one hand, the Articles of Confederation had qualities that citizens appreciated. Because the Articles did not set up a very strong government, states got to keep their power and independence. There was no powerful government telling them what to do. Citizens also wanted protection, and the Articles gave Congress the power to create a military to protect all the states. So, if you can look over on the side, you see it says pros. Put a box around the word pros, and then I want you to put a box around that entire paragraph we just read, because those are the pros. Those are what was good about this new government they created under the Articles of Confederation. Let's go back to the reading. However, there were problems. For one thing, the Articles did not give Congress the power to enforce laws. So the Congress was making laws, but they never created a way to enforce the laws, a way to make people follow them. So what's the point of making a law if no one's going to follow it? Congress also had no power to collect taxes to pay for the military. So they made this new government, but they had no way to collect taxes to have money to pay for the government. And in order to change the Articles, every single state had to agree to the changes. These and other problems meant that in general, citizens felt like the relationship or the government wasn't working. So I want you to put a star around the word cons, and on the left-hand side, I want you to put a star so that you know this paragraph are the cons or the problems with the Articles of Confederation. Lots of differences. With 13 different states, there was no easy solution. Here's why. First, states had different needs. For example, some states depended on fishing, while others mostly grew crops. So because of the way the United States is set up, the population of people, they do a lot of different things. Some people are farmers, some people work in the cities, some people are fishermen, some people grow one crop in one climate and they grow another crop down south in another. So it's very diverse population. The second is states had different sizes. Some states had many people and others had few. So you had very large states mixed with some very tiny states like you have up north. People had different opinions. Some people feared a central government, while others thought the central government was necessary. So some people wanted like a big, strong government in charge of the whole United States, while other people, they were afraid of that because they got rid of that big, strong king. So instead, other people, they wanted the local state governments to be in charge. This way, there was no powerful government. So you had a lot of different ideas. Some people wanted a strong government, some people didn't. Some people were farmers, some people were city people, and they're trying to make a government that would work for everyone. I want you to, for those 3 bulleted points, I want you to either underline or highlight all 3 of them. The last one was especially troublesome. Many people feared they would lose their freedom if the central government had too much power. Others were tired of the weak government created under the Articles of Confederation and felt like nothing would ever get done if nobody was in charge. Because of all these problems that were happening, the people began to get frustrated. So I'm going to show you a quick video clip about what happened to really shake up the new American government and realize we need to make something new. And this thing was called Shays' Rebellion. So watch this quick cartoon on Shays' Rebellion, and afterwards there'll be a question you need to answer on the top of the next page. So make sure you pay attention.
Desperately needed a leader. Now they had one. Daniel Shays. By 1786, post-Revolutionary War America was on the verge of economic collapse. Everywhere, businesses were closing, and debt was running rampant. Most were unable to pay their debts, and were thrown into prison where they suffered in horrible conditions. The state governments were teetering on the verge of bankruptcy, and had instituted a policy of heavy taxation. The federal government was helpless to solve these problems, because it had been given no political power. In western Massachusetts, Daniel Shays and his followers had been speaking out against the state government's policies, but their entreaties had fallen on deaf ears. They decided they had to take action. On September 29th, 1786, a boiling point was reached. As the court prepared to convene, 1,000 men came out of the wilderness on a hill above Springfield, Massachusetts. Shays now unsheathed his sword and ordered the fife and drum players to strike up a tune. The men began marching in cadence, sprigs of hemlock swaying on their heads as they held their weapons tightly.
The rebels marched on the debtor courts with muskets. Many of them had guns. They also had clubs. They brought whatever was convenient or available to them.
In troubled times, however, when there was fear of violence, the militia would attend the court proceedings in order to provide greater strength and authority.
Jonathan Judd, one of the 900 government militiamen who stood inside the court building, recorded the events.
A sorrowful day. Brother against brother, father against son, militia at the courthouse, and mob above the ferry. The mob threatened the lives of all who opposed them.
The insurgents, they were ready to attack the government militia.
Calling upon his experience in the Revolutionary War, Shays had his men make a show of loading their muskets. As soon as the weapons were loaded, Shays charged with his men in a fury toward the courthouse. Their mission was to shut down the courts by any means necessary.
And at that point, the judges adjourned the court without doing any business.
As long as the courts were shut down, none of the western farmers could be sent to jail for their debts. It was the first major victory for Shays and his men, who became known as Shaysites. This rebel army carried out numerous attacks across New England over the next few months. Shays and his men closed courts in Northampton, Concord, and Worcester. As 1786 progressed, the uprising attracted nearly 9,000 rebels spread across New England. As word of these attacks reached Boston, many wealthy businessmen became distraught with the growing rebellion. Samuel Adams decided to speak out.
Rebellion against a king may be pardoned, but the man who dares rebel against the laws of the Republic ought to suffer death!
Now that you've watched that video clip, on the top of the page here, above where it says Wanted a Just Right Government, I want you to write Shays Rebellion. Then put a line and put caused by the Articles of Confederation or caused by the AOC. Because when you're going through this handout, you need to realize that they didn't just go from having all these problems to decide, hey, let's fix it. Something had to happen because of those problems. And what happened was Shays Rebellion. Let's continue on with the reading. Let's fix this thing. In 1787, representatives from every state except Rhode Island met in Philadelphia to fix the Articles. We call this meeting the Constitutional Convention because they ended up doing more than just fixing the Articles. They wrote the Constitution. I want you to underline or highlight the word Constitutional Convention and then underline or highlight where it says they wrote the Constitution. Because what's important about the Constitutional Convention is that's when they wrote the Constitution. But agreeing on a new way to structure the government wasn't easy. Some states floated a new idea. Why not create a government with 3 branches? The new government could have a legislative branch with a Congress to make laws, an executive branch led by a president to carry out laws, and a judicial branch with courts to interpret laws. It sounded good, but there was one major problem. How many votes would each state get in Congress? Voting in Congress, yes, it's a big deal. Why? Because some states have a large population and some have a small population. Under the Articles of Confederation, each state got 1 vote no matter how many people it had. That meant people in large states had less influence in Congress. Naturally, large states thought this wasn't fair. They thought they should get more votes because they had more people. Small states, however, thought it was a pretty good deal. Even though they were small, they had the same amount of power and influence as large states. They wanted to keep a 1 vote per state system. So they were arguing back and forth. The large states wanted to have more votes in Congress because they represented more people. And the small states didn't like that idea because they didn't want the large states bossing them around. Battle of the Plans. 2 different plans emerged, one favoring small states and one favoring large states. Can you tell which is which? The Virginia plan. The legislative branch has 2 chambers, and the number of votes depends on the state's population. So, since the Virginia plan was wanting the number of votes the state to get to depend on how many people live there, obviously that was what the big states wanted. So I want you to write somewhere around the word Virginia plan, big states or large states. The New Jersey plan, the legislative branch has 1 chamber, each state gets 1 vote. So they wanted all the states to have the same amount of power, the same amount of votes. So the New Jersey plan would be the smaller state. So write that somewhere near the New Jersey plan. The Constitution solution. The 2 sides, large states and small states, finally reached a compromise. And for those of you that don't know, a compromise is like an agreement, when you both agree to give a little bit to come to an agreement. The Constitution was the second and final attempt to write a document that would govern the United States. Underline or highlight that sentence and put a star next to it on the side of the page. And we still follow it today. Under the Constitution, Congress is divided into 2 chambers, the Senate and the House of Representatives. In the Senate, each state gets 2 votes, no matter what size it is. So that's the idea from that New Jersey plan. All the states have the same power in the Senate. They all get 2 votes. This favors the small states. In the House of Representatives, the more people a state has, the more votes it gets. So the House of Representatives is like the Virginia plan. The more your population, the more people you have, the more votes you get. This favors the large states. The Constitution also solved some of the other problems found in the Articles of Confederation. The Articles didn't require states to treat citizens from other states the same as their own, but the Constitution does. So no matter what state you're from, you're still an American, you're still part of the United States. The Articles of Confederation, the Articles couldn't be changed unless all the states agreed, but the Constitution can be changed if 3/4 of the states agree. So as long as, a good majority, 3/4, 75% of the states want to do something, then they can do it. And the Articles didn't require states to follow laws Congress passed, but the Constitution says federal laws are superior to state laws. So that's the important one. The Articles of Confederation, they can pass laws and nobody followed them. But the Constitution says you follow these laws and they are more powerful than state laws. So you can't make a state law going against a federal law because the federal laws are the most powerful laws. So this Constitution was like a compromise, and everyone agreed to follow it, and it became the government which we have till this day.
We're going to be talking today about the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. Anytime you see the word AOC, you know that we're talking about the Articles of Confederation. And today we're going to focus in on the weaknesses of that. When we talk about the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, there are 5 things that I want to focus on that lead to a 6th thing. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things about the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. The first one, let's grab our pink and let's write on our pinky. We know that it's our weakest finger, and that represents, in talking about the Articles of Confederation, the weak central government. So let's write there, weak central government, GOVT. I hope you can see the weak central government there. There you go. Let's see if I can get it focused. Weak central government there. It is your weakest finger, and that is one of the weakest parts of the Articles of Confederation. The next is grab your yellow. We're going to talk about our ring finger. And as you know, this is where wedding rings go. So let's draw a wedding ring on there in yellow to represent a gold wedding ring. And as you know, wedding rings cost a lot of money. But the problem was with the Articles of Confederation that the government, the central government, could not raise any money because they could not tax. And so let's write here, no money. And I drew a dollar sign. I hope you can see that. No money. No money. Okay? No money on your ring finger. Our next weakness of the Articles, we need to grab our green. And green represents land here. And without trying to be vulgar, we know that this middle finger has caused and can cause a lot of disputes. And one problem with the Articles of Confederation was there were a lot of boundary disputes. Boundary disputes, especially with the Northwest Ordinance. There were many states expecting to get that land from Virginia to New York to Pennsylvania. They were all fighting over this land. And that brings me to our next finger, our pointer finger. And I don't know about you, but if my mom ever used this finger and shook it at me, I knew I was in trouble and I knew I had done something wrong. And this finger represents the disagreements between the states. It represents the disagreements between the states. And so let's grab your red. I'm going to use a highlighter. I think this one is going out on me. But let's use our red to talk about the quarreling states. Quarreling states. And we know that the word quarrel, Q-U-A-R-R-E-L, means to fight. Talking about the fighting states, the quarreling states. And all of this, the weak central government, the no money, not being able to tax, the boundary disputes, the quarreling states, leads us to our thumb. And I don't know if you've ever went thumbs down on somebody or towards somebody, but you know that doesn't go over very well. If I give you the thumbs down, you know that I'm doing this disapprovingly, like I don't like what you're doing. And it's not like I'm showing you any respect. And so we're going to focus on the thumbs down as no respect. Okay? No respect. From other states, from other nations, and we're getting worried here that because of our quarreling nature, because of our weak central government, we're not going to be respected as far as other states, other countries go. And so this leads us to our last point, which I want you to grab your gray or your black, and we'll just use this lightly. And I want you to put your fist down in the middle of this, and let's try to trace over this fist here, getting our knuckles in there, showing our fist of anger as well as it can possibly look here. Oh boy. So this is our fist of anger. Okay? This is our fist of anger. And what happened, because of all of these problems, there was a man named Daniel Shays, man named Daniel Shays. Yes, it sounds like it's plural, but his name was Shays. And what we need to talk about this is Shays' rebellion. You see, Daniel Shays was very unhappy with the way the government was going and treating him as a farmer and his friends who were also farmers. They were putting them in jail because they couldn't pay their debts. But the government wasn't able to help them because the government had no money itself. And it just led to this big revolt between Shays and the government. And unfortunately, Shays and his fellow revolters lost this small battle. But it also helped the government realize that the Articles of Confederation were very weak and there needed to be a change.
Now that you've finished the assignment, look back at the scale and make sure you've met the learning goal. Are you able to identify how the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation led to the writing of the Constitution? So how the problems that they were having with the Articles of Confederation ended up leading to them having to make a new government with the Constitution? If you can explain those weaknesses, then you've met the learning goal. For your exit ticket out the door, make sure you do the last link on the bottom of this module.